Nights, Hearken, episode 15 of the Arad Airways podcast. And guys, last time we did this was March. So, officially this series has now become the podcast where I talk about DFO whenever the hell I feel like it, because, two podcasts a year, that's kind of the rate we're going at now. And you know what? I hope you guys are okay with that. DFO, it's been on the back burner of my life as it is, my personal life as it is. Hard to say. It's like my fourth highest priority on my life right now because I've got a lot going on. I'll probably talk a little bit about that, but I've talked about that a lot in my stream lately. But guys, a lot of stuff has happened in DFO as of late. We got Black Purgatory. I want to talk a little bit about BP and some changes to that. We even got the solo mode of BP. That kind of came really quickly, so I'm kind of happy about that. I like BP as a system. We'll talk a little bit about that. We've gotten Third Awakenings for the Knights, which was obviously, I made a video about that. One of the few videos I've made this year. And then we currently have the Lancers Third Awakening. But I want to spend the majority of this video, guys, I want to talk about KDNF. Obviously, what happens in KDNF will trickle down over to DFOG eventually, sometime sooner rather than later. But there's a lot of big things that are coming. Some things that I have been complaining about for 6 years straight. I have been constantly complaining about have been addressed. In fact, some people think that I had direct communications with the director this time, because most of the stuff that I've been bitching about and most of the things that I keep reassuring people about, especially about Elven Knight in particular, was brought up in the director's no, I want to talk about that, guys. Huge kind of interview with the current director of DFO, who used to be the old director of DFO. He's kind of returned back into that role. He covered a lot of stuff. Elven Knight was talked about, guys. Things like the synergies and buffers have been directly addressed. Things like the farming. There's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. We'll spend the majority of this podcast talking about it. But, well, I guess first thing we'll talk about, guys, is my little personal trials going on right now. It's not really trials. It's more of a kind of personal shift. Just to kind of put it bluntly, guys, I've been kind of trapped into the whole apartment and rent system for the better part of my young life here. I got out of school, got an apartment, and just started working. And then I changed my jobs because I wasn't happy about my jobs. And then I got another apartment and started working. And the thing that has always been on the back of my mind is that the apartment costs keep going up. And the thing about apartments, for those of you guys who aren't old enough or aren't paying your own rent is a fucking black hole where your money goes, man. It's a shame. And I'm paying more and more every month, it seems like. I'm paying more into this rent, and it's a black hole because, you're only borrowing the property that you're staying on. You don't own it, and there's a lot of other options where you can own the property that you're paying into. Like, for instance, if you get a loan on a house, you're paying into owning that house eventually. You don't own it yet, but you're paying into it. You don't do that with renting. You're literally just throwing your money away to somebody else who already owns it, and it's just a gold. I say a gold sink because that's what I was thinking about with DFO. But it's a real life money sink, guys. It is something that is very unsatisfying. It's just I'm seeing this money disappear when I could be doing something better. So I decided, you know what? I am going to do something better. But I wasn't confident enough, and I don't even know if I have the credit enough to get a house. So instead, I got a loan. And I got a loan for an RV. So I actually bought myself an RV. I'll put a picture of it on the screen because I'm really proud of it. Oh, man. It was... I actually stood there and took this picture inside, and I was just beaming. I was happy. I was like, we did it. I'm so happy. And, it looks small, but that's 32 feet, guys. And that's more than enough that I need to live in. I look at what I do in my apartment now. What do? I go to my bedroom to sleep. I go to the computer to fucking play DFO. I go to the bathroom when I need to. I hardly even use the kitchen, but I have a kitchen there. And you know what? That's all I need. That's all you need. And one of those walls on the left side is actually a slide out, so it actually is more room than it looks. And guys, it's such a big move forward. Now, that being said, the internet situation, I'm pretty confident is going to be good enough to game. I don't know about stable enough to stream, but definitely fine enough to upload videos and still be able to do the YouTube thing. So I'm not worried about that there. But I am going to be a Wi-Fi warrior, at least for a little while here while I'm living in this RV. But that's kind of what the gist is. That's what I'm doing with my life right now. And I'm really happy that I'm getting out of renting. Okay. And the one thing I want to say to you guys out there, and something that I just kind of want to live my life like, is like, I think that problems are going to arise in your life, You're going to be a victim of some kind of injustice or crime, or you're not going to be happy about something, you're going to have something happen to you that you're just going to complain about. You're going to say, this is unfair, or I don't like this, right? That's going to happen. 100% that's going to happen at some point in your life. The thing that I want to tell you guys, though, is there's a difference between being a victim of some kind of injustice or crime and staying a victim of that same crime year over year, okay? You're going to have something bad happen to you. It's your fault, though, if you keep letting that bad thing happen to you. You have to step up and do something about it, guys. I'm not going to keep complaining about rent over and over, month after month, year after year. I'm going to do something about it. So this is what I decided to do about it. And, you know, there was a million other options I could have done. My first option actually wasn't an RV. It was actually a van. But after doing some research, that was actually more expensive and much more limiting. You know, you could get a house mortgage if you have the credit for it. You can definitely get a house mortgage if you're planning on staying in one location for a long time. As for me, I'm still pretty mobile. You know, I'm willing to get experience anywhere in the country, so I'm willing to move too. So I thought this was the best option for me and the most cost-effective and useful option for me. So that's what I'm doing. Anyway, so if you're wondering why I haven't been streaming or if I haven't been making videos for the past 2.5 months or so, I have been pursuing this pretty much daily. I've been going out. I've driven out several hours away from where I currently live to try to find the perfect RV, and I did. I found one, and it was beautiful. Awesome. So I'm really happy about that. But yeah, that's not about DFO. I just wanted to give you guys an update about my life and an excuse as to why these podcasts and videos and streams don't come out. It's just an excuse. Trust me, I've had the time to be able to do that if I wanted to, but just been on the back burner. Anyway, guys, first topic of DFO. If you wanted to skip that whole personal segment, we have got Black Purgatory now. I think that is the main big update that we've gotten. After Sirocco, I think we got Exiles for a little bit. That we were kind of just something that we could do to increase our character's strength. Sirocco, obviously, we've been doing Sirocco raiding. The next big upgrade, and this is a huge upgrade, is Black Purgatory, guys. What Black Purgatory does is it takes those 4 same slots that you get from Sirocco, and you can now add an additional strengthening modifier onto it. It kind of serves 2 purposes for doing this. So when you do use that new system, and let me get the appropriate name just so I don't mess this up here. All right, they just say option change, okay? So I guess it's kind of a lame name, but yeah, they basically call it an option change, okay? So this is only applicable for those Sirocco slots, okay? So I'm talking about your weapon primarily. I'm talking about your bottoms for your pants. I'm talking about the sub-equipment, and I'm talking about the ring. Those 4 slots now have the ability to be option changed by the Black Purgatory system. It's basically its own daily dungeon that you can farm, as well as a weekly type of content that you can enter 2 times a week to get these materials that you can use at the Judy Ringwood NPC to basically use the equipment option change feature. And what it does, it kind of serves 2 purposes, okay? First and foremost, it gives you higher percentages of stats. So right off the bat, this is just straight up making your damage higher, okay? Because whatever modifiers that you have on your gear, these modifiers are higher than that. So basically everybody in the game, no matter if you're Sirocco grad or not, this is kind of the cool thing about this system, is that you don't need to have Sirocco gear to put this system on. You can equipment change any level 100 epic, and you can put this equipment option change effect on it, and you're just going to be straight up stronger. So this is kind of weird how it only applies to the base gear, not the Sirocco upgrade gear, even though it only affects the Sirocco upgrade slot. So just wanted to mention that this is something you should be doing when you're strong enough. I think when you're strong enough, it's about when you graduate from 2+2. If you're like beating 2+2 really easily, then you're going to be strong enough to do the new 2+2, which is called 1+1+1+1, or in other words, ones, and it is the dailies for Black Purgatory. So when you're able to do Black Purgatory, is when you can start getting these materials here, you know, the Ore of Despair, you can start using them for the equipment option change. Now, so that's the first thing it does. It gives you higher percentages of your mods, and so you're just straight up going to get more damage in that way. But the more important thing is that you can use the option change system to change the modifier itself. Okay, there are a lot of modifiers in DFO. If you guys don't really know how the damage system is calculated, there are a ton of different modifiers. There's the damage modifier, crit damage modifier, bonus damage modifier, all attack, skill attack, P attack, or M attack, strength and int. There are a ton of different modifiers that all of your gear can have. And how they work in DFO, it's a very simple rule, okay? All modifiers are additive with themselves and multiplicative with each other. Okay, so what that means, what that translates to in layman's terms, guys, is the goal that you should be trying to shoot for is to try to equalize all of the modifiers equally. You don't want to try to stack one too high at the cost of lowering the others, because you're not going to get as much mathematical increase for doing that. You have to do the math on what figures to be the most. You know, you literally got to multiply them together to figure out how the multiplier works out. But generally speaking, you don't want your modifier, you don't want like a low modifier. You want to try to keep them as equal as possible. So this system allows you to modulate your modifiers a little bit. You can change which modifier it gives for those 4 slots. You know, so that's a huge thing, because some sets, you know, you can't change the set effects of what each piece of gear has. You can't change, you know, what the base stat of the gear, whatever set you're wearing. Again, there's a million combinations you can make with your gear sets, but you can't really change that, what you get when you wear the full set, but at least you can modify some of those values to try to get higher modifiers. So 2 things that Black Purgatory does: gives you higher modifiers and allows you to change some of the modifiers to better equalize your gear. Overall, what that means is higher damage, okay? And hopefully, you know, if you kind of understand how the damage system works in DFO, then you kind of get why this is really, really good and really important. And if you don't, then I really highly suggest you kind of figure out how the damage modifiers work. So what I suggest doing, guys, go into game, press the M key to pull up your status window, and then go to details. Press the details button, try to understand what that page is telling you, and multiply those numbers together. You know, you're going to see what I'm talking about here. You know, the equipment bonus modifiers. Literally multiply those numbers together and you'll see why trying to equalize those modifiers is a good thing. Sometimes you can't do it. Like, for instance, my monk, I know, has a setup right now that has a ton of PMI on it, and I can't manage to get off of how much PMI I have. I need another set entirely than what I'm wearing. So if I want to try to get a stronger set, and which is exactly why some sets are better than others when you put them into the calculator. So just thought I should mention that. That's what BP is doing. If you don't want to believe anything of what I'm saying, then just use the calculator. I think the calculator has an option. It's a little primitive and it tells you the wrong stuff sometimes, but the calculator can be used to try to calculate what your BP mod should be and what you should strive for. But if you understand how the damage modifiers work, BP is going to take you a long way. But that is on the BP system itself, guys. So that's why you're running it. There is, you know, these fragments that you can get that can guarantee you get the highest possible modifier value, which is kind of rare to get, which is really good. It can guarantee basically some type of optimization guarantee, which is good. But guys, let's talk about BP itself. Now, unlike Mount Exiles, which was kind of dead on arrival, Black Purgatory fills a very nice niche in terms of its difficulty. What they did with Black Purgatory is they allowed basically several different routes through the dungeon. If you guys have done the Operation Hope dungeon, then you are kind of familiar to the idea of a scrolling dungeon. Black Purgatory is designed as one continuous dungeon all the way through. You aren't just leaving and entering another instance. No, you're just going through and you're selecting your path. And the cool thing about this dungeon and how they've implemented it is that it is known that if you take the upper paths, you actually increase the difficulty of the dungeon at the cost of higher rewards at the end. So what you can do is route your plan even before you go in. Like, okay, we're only going to do level 1 difficulty. We're all really weak in this party. We're always going to take the bottom path, which is the easy path. And we're just going to go the easy path all the way down the mountain. For those of you guys who have ever gone skiing, you guys know the green circle. That's like the beginner path. The upper path is like your black diamond. You know, like, yo, that's the black diamond. If you're not a good skier, don't go up there. Same thing in this way. Take the bottom path if you're weaker, and then the upper path is your black diamond. And the cool thing is they have like difficulties in between. Like maybe you're kind of strong, so that you'll take the bottom path most of the way, and then like for the last junction you'll take the top path, and that'll make it a level 2 run. or you could take a level 3 run, or if you're really badass, you'll do the level 4 runs, which you really got to be badass to do that. But I've been in parties who have done level 3 runs. If you're really pretty solid, you have a pretty solid team, do level 3. If you're above average, do the level 2. And if you're just like barely cut line, hey, do the level 1. No harm, no foul there, because level 1 gives pretty decent rewards regardless. So again, the goal is to try to use this option change system. So I really like how they implemented it. It's a really cool dungeon. In terms of its difficulty, there's a lot of bosses, and a lot of the bosses have gimmicks. Unfortunately, most people only go the routes that can ensure that they can bypass most of the gimmicks that they can. If they can't bypass the gimmicks, then they kind of figure, oh, I'm too weak for this run, let's bump it down a level, because if we see any gimmicks, we're too weak. That's kind of the idea, the method that most people take. But when this content released and we were forced to do most of the gimmicks because we didn't know, it was kind of fun. And honestly, I think the content is still pretty fun, and I love the ability to have the option to say, hey, you know what, let's fuck around, let's do a harder difficulty this time, and we'll just take longer to do it. I love having that option. I think that's the proper way to define the difficulty, instead of the way that they do it with Mount Exiles, where they have like a set difficulty and you can skip dungeons to make it technically harder. I don't really like that. I really like how they did it in Black Purgatory, which is way more fun and engaging, and it forces you to do the same kind of content, but it's just harder. You're not just skipping other content. No, you're doing the same content, you're doing the same run, but it's just harder. It's just scaled harder. And I think they managed to nail that level of difficulty based around how strong we are as characters in the game at this state, with our new talismans, with our new Sirocco upgrade. Most of us are Sirocco grad, So if you're doing that, they nailed the difficulty, and I think it's a good system. It's something that is just, it really nicely fit into the 100 cap meta or roadmap, I should say, pretty nicely. So I don't know. How do you guys feel about BP? I know the one complaint that a lot of people are going to have, and a lot of people's complaint about 100 cap in general, is that BP as a system is very RNG focused. You can re-roll your thing 15 times in a row, and it's straight up just going to be weaker every roll that you do it. So the cool thing is you don't have to be stuck with the re-roll that you do. So even though you re-roll into a weaker stat, you don't have to keep it like you do the freaking Kaleido boxes. I can't believe the Kaleidos have gone this long working like that. Kaleido boxes force you to take the new roll regardless of if it's weaker or not. BP allows you to select, hey, do you want to change, or do you want to keep your old mod? Now, unfortunately, that means that you'll be re-rolling 15 times in a row, and all of them are weaker than your current mod, which is kind of just, oh, well, there goes that week of work that I don't have anything to show for it, which really is annoying. I wish there was some kind of, pity system for every time you rolled. Maybe like every time you roll, you get like 1/10 of one of those fearsome eyes. You need a lot of fearsome eyes to be guaranteed the roll. Well, hey, maybe every time you roll with the BP system, maybe it gives you like 1/20th of a fearsome eye, so that at least when you're rolling and you don't get anything, you're still striving towards optimizing that character for good. But overall, I think BP is a decent system. Got no complaints about it. Has happily replaced talisman farming in Mount Exiles, and I'm good with that. All right, guys. Next thing we got to talk about, and this will be just a short discussion. 3As. What new 3As have we gotten? I think since the last podcast, we've gotten a lot of them. I think we got Rogue or the Thieves. Rogue is the only thief to me. We got Female Gunner. We obviously got the Knights. We obviously got the Lancers. And, that doesn't leave very many of them left. There are still some left, guys. We got the Agents that are still left to go. I'm kind of excited to see what they're going to do with Secret Agent. That's really the only one I've bothered to gear up. I know some people have the other ones. I know there's at least 10 of you guys who have the Pathfinder. Get hype for your cube room or whatever. And then, of course, we got Dark Knight and Creator. So we're only six Third Awakenings before we are officially caught up in terms of Third Awakening. Everybody's going to have their Third Awakening, and that's going to be really cool, because the only thing left in terms of character balance is the actual character balances themselves, which, at least currently, Korea is in the process of doing a character balance themselves. Okay, so what ended up happening in Korea? Let me tell you a little bit about Korea. I don't want to talk about them just yet, but it's a little bit about what's been going on in Korea since, they finished their 3As. Is that two things? Okay, when they finished their 3As, You know, they told everybody, okay, we know people have been complaining about the balance of 3As, about the balance of characters. You know, Vagabond is on the top of the charts. There's no reason why Vagabond is so strong when compared to everybody else. You know, we need balance. And some of these Third Awakenings fucking suck, okay? Like, really bad. You know, so they have been addressing this, okay? So they started out, they're kind of doing it in sections. I think they're doing like 10 characters at a time. You know, I think in the first batch we saw characters like Dragoon, characters like Wind Boy. You know, all of these guys are getting buffs, and they're kind of like generic damage buffs across the board, if we're being honest. Soulbender got a little bit of attention. We're seeing like generic bullshit, you know, like oh yeah, 10% here, 20% here, 30% damage across the board, like that kind of stuff, which that is fine. I'm okay with that, but those kind of seem like very easy changes if you're asking me. You know, it doesn't really take into account what the 3A kind of brought, what kind of challenges 3A characters face, you know, kind of the problems of the character. Like, for instance, F-Striker, for instance, not having a passive at all, a 3A passive, or Brawler potentially seeing a damage. Well, she definitely got a damage buff, but not nearly as much as you would think from the 3A. So anyway, the point here being, it doesn't really address kind of the changes that the 3A brought. They're just damage. Like, here's stop complaining, here's 30%. And they're really lazy across the board. I think a computer program can probably equalize everybody's damage in 1 second if they really wanted to. They'd be like, okay, what's the max damage output of Vagabond? Okay, let's make everybody that strong. And a computer program can do that in 1 second, you know? So those are not the type of balance patches I think people are waiting for. Very lackluster, very whatever, here, stop complaining kind of thing. And then in the midst of that, so they're only releasing like 10 at a time, right? And the big drama in Korea, big drama. They dropped down the Blade class. And the Blade class is the 5th subclass for the female Slayer class. She's kind of cool. She uses a katana, has a lot of fast-moving skills. She's actually a fixed damage physical character, which is kind of surprising. We kind of figured if they were going to release a new character, it would be like, you know, that would stop releasing fixed damage characters because that doesn't make them as much money. But yeah, no, we've got Blade, physical, independent attack, and here's the kicker. She's OP. She's actually overtuned to shit. She is a mega strong, and we're going to see why that's the case when we talk about the correct director's note. But she's overtuned, and they decided to release this in the middle of these patches that they're trying to bring everybody else up to, you know, higher levels. And then they released this mega overtuned character, and they, at the same time, they stopped temporarily, they stopped with the patch updates for all of the other characters. So this big drama in Korea, people were making a big fuss about it. I really think it was a major overreaction, but suffice it to say, people were not happy that they kind of stopped doing the patches after they had lackluster patches to begin with, you know, just damage up increases. They had lackluster stuff, and now they're releasing OP characters, and then where are the patches? Like, they think that people are diverting too much effort into trying to sell you into DFO and to sell you into making new characters and spending money and committing your time into making new characters, and not enough time balancing. Now, I'm not going to sit here I'm on the board of directors or anything, but I don't think that's what's going on. But, you know, they got to keep the game moving. They got to keep updating it. And, you know, Koreans weren't happy about the order in which that is. And maybe you guys can tell me a little bit better about that controversy in the description below, as I'm sure people are dying to hear the drama as to what the hell the Koreans are complaining about. But basically, when Blade released, they ratioed the shit out of her release video. There were a lot of people saying the game's dead and everything under the sun. Come to find out, you know, if you look on Dunfa or something, you're gonna see that Blade is like top 10 of the most created characters in DFO right now. Like, oh yeah, you guys are hyped for Blade. Don't even try to fucking act right now. But suffice it to say, guys, they're still working on balance patches. They're not going to be very in-depth. You're not going to see overhauls of your character. You might see 1 or 2 skills getting changed. You might see new skills, which is kind of something that I'm always happy to see. I'm always happy to see new skills and new viable, as long as they're viable, even utility type skills. I think Nen is going to be slated to get actually a level like a 30 and 35 skill that's brand new. Skirmisher, I signed in my Skirmisher the other day. He got a new skill. Straight up new skill. Nobody told me about that shit. Obviously, if that was my main, I would have learned. But when I signed into him with my 3A, he's got a brand new skill. So I love seeing new stuff, And as long as they're strong and they're viable and they can kind of shake up the character, they're still doing balance patches though, and they're probably going to hit all the characters. And as we'll see in the Korean director kind of roundup, they do address some of the other bigger issues, like with the 3A active awakenings. You know, they're going to be changing some of them, like the Inquisitor is going to be completely changed. The artwork is going to be redone. Oh my God, they need to get Ghost Boy out of here, dude. They need to get his ass out of my face. Look at him. Get him out of here. They're going to be changing the one, like FNN, they're going to be changing. They're going to be changing Azura. They're going to be changing a lot of stuff, guys. So I think they're still updating the stuff that you guys have been mostly complaining about. And that's kind of updates to come, guys, okay? So we're still waiting on the end of 3As. But, guys, we're going to be getting balanced patches for characters, as well as the new Blade class. Hopefully you guys are excited for that. We don't have it yet, but that's kind of what Korea is suffering through now. Again, a lot of the ways that I like to look at DFOG is that DFOG is like the second son. Korea is the first son. They're the test son. You only know how to do it good after you've done it at least one time. So Korea, they're testing the waters. They're saying, okay, how do we update this without pissing everybody off? Oh shit, we pissed everybody off. When it comes to DFOG, everything's going to be hunky-dory, man. It's going to be good. We're going to have it made because they're going to work out all the bugs. They're probably, I don't know if they're going to release Blade in the overtuned state that she's in, because right now she's overtuned. She's literally too strong ratio-wise. They're going to be nerfing that. That's already been confirmed, so they're going to be nerfing that. And yeah, we're going to be getting character balances, even though they might not be very game-changing, mostly just ratio and number changing, so not too exciting, but at least if you're weaker or on the weaker end, you're going to be getting a damage buff, almost certainly. In fact, that's what they're doing. I don't think anybody's really getting nerfed. Everybody's just getting buffed. So that's good. And last, guys, my last topic that I want to talk about. Guys, I keep talking about this director's talk that they've had. You know, I made a video a couple years ago for my Project Barbecue kind of recap video. I said that a new director is taking up the seat, Kang Jung-ho. That director has been director for a couple years now, almost a couple years at least. And he stepped down, and now the old director that I think was like during 90-95 cap, he has no name really. He's not publicly out there and known as well, but he's the one who kind of did this big interview, and he's talking about the changes that he wants to do and make to DFO. And the story goes, let me preface before I start talking about the bullet points of this interview. Let me tell you what happened, guys. So the director, who's been, you know, really busy with work, he decides, okay, you know what? I want to play the new Blade character. I want to play her legit. I want to actually, like, make a Blade character from start, level her, and get her to end game. Because it's a new character. I want to try her. And in his journey, you're going to see it in the interview. In his journey, he learned some things about DFO. I think he finally played DFO and understood the problems that we have faced as a player base, as a community, as a game we have faced since the beginning of time. He finally understands after his journey to leveling his Blade. I'm going to talk about it because some of what happened to him was like hilarious. Needless to say, he had an encounter with some elitists and they fucking owned him. The director of the game, yo, get bodied. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to put on the screen one of the translations. This isn't the one that I read initially. I think somebody else did it, but this is from Yannicka KR, who's posted it on Reddit. And it's a very great translation. It's really long. It covers basically the entire thing, but I'm going to very briefly summarize most of the key topics out of it. You guys can read it yourself. I'll leave a link in the description below. But I talked about this at length on my stream. I went through every single thing. Talked about it for a couple hours. I'm going to condense it in this version, obviously, this podcast. So you guys can just listen and kind of figure out what's going to be coming to DFO or KDNF first. They'll test it out in KDNF, and as the second son, we'll get the optimized version. But kind of some things to expect in our version of the game after Korea tests it out for us. Okay, so there are some key directions that the director wants to go in. You know, there's some kind of key things that he wants to hone in on and make sure that he handles. First and foremost, guys, he wants to lower the farming relevance. Basically what that means is he doesn't want you farming as long as you are now. There's very specifics as to what this entails, but basically what we're talking about, guys, is he doesn't want you to be doing 2+2 or 5+5 or Gant Palace or any of those dungeons where you're farming stuff for as long. So he's basically like doubling the drop rate. For a lot of this stuff, hell mode, things like mythic drop rate, all of those hell modes are getting their drop rates massively increased. You know, I think he said 5 times on the mythic drop rate, which is huge. I mean, obviously huge. You're not going to be farming as long in various content to get gear, such as, Black Purgatory, Sirocco, Ozma. Just getting gear is going to be easy. Okay, but the thing I kind of want to hint on is I think the main reason that they're doing that is because 105 cap has to be coming soon. This is not something that they would do unless 105 cap was looming, okay? Because basically, if you're going to be doubling everybody's drop chances, doubling everybody's, or reducing everybody's farming time in half, the reason that they put the farming time as it is because they wanted to delay the game as much as possible, delay your ability to get to end game as much as possible. So the fact that they're reducing it by half tells me that, okay, we're starting to hit the end of the life cycle of 100 cap, and 105 cap has got to be somewhere down the line. That's the only reason why a lot of this stuff is going to be happening, which is good. I'm not complaining, especially for people who are trying to get into the game. I think they should have done this sooner. Maybe not made it so drastic like what they're planning, like double drop rate and all this shit, but they really should have been adjusting the drop rate in accordance to how close we were to the end of the cap's life. Because again, for people who are trying to get into the cap and starting brand new, it sucks that they have to go through the same trials that people who were there from the very beginning already got a head start on. They really should be changing them and adjusting them in accordance to the life cycle of the cap. But either way, that's what's going to be happening. Lower farming relevance. The next main thing, actually, it's kind of tied to PvP. Somebody asked like a question about, hey, what are you guys going to be doing about PvP? And basically his answer was like, PvP is like only filled with those like sweaty tryhards, okay? There's only good people in PvP right now. But one thing that they're going to do to address PvP and will kind of come as a consequence of it is they're going to try to improve the clients, guys. Okay, they're going to try to improve the client because lag and frame drops kill all kinds of enjoyments. And so that's in turn going to help PvP. So that's a big overarching change, trying to improve the client. I've heard this before. This client still feels like it was made 16 years ago, which I don't doubt that it was. So, I mean, we'll see. I'm always a little bit skeptical when they say they're going to improve the client when the client still feels like this old. But, if they say they're going to try to work on it, then I guess that's the case. At this point, I've kind of just gotten used to it. But, hey, if you're a big PvPer and if you're a PvEer, if you play Scummoner and you're tired of your frames getting completely eaten up, hey, maybe this change will help you. So those two things, guys, we're going to get a client increase. We're going to get farming basically reworked, all the farming dungeons reworked. A very important thing to mention about that, one thing that they're planning on adding to raids is 50% of the rewards are going to be account bound. So whenever you get rewards, half of those rewards are an account bound reward. That is huge. It's massive. It is such a big deal. It's something that was just one single bullet point, but when you think about it, for those of us who make a lot of alts and bring them to raids, this is so big. What it means is you can start to funnel materials onto one character and start graduating characters way sooner than other people who are only running the characters that they're trying to gear up. You can use your alts to fund your mains, which is awesome. It kind of rewards people who have multiple alts, who keep bringing characters to raids. So I really like that change. And the really nice thing is that it works both ways. You can also use your mains once they graduate to fund your alts. That's kind of the problem with Sirocco now, is that I don't feel compelled to really keep playing that and doing that raid on my main because I've already graduated. What's the point? Everything is character bound. I had to hope to get account bound mats. Well, now I have a reason. I can farm on my main because I can do raids really easily and then funnel that to my alts after I've already graduated. It's just a really smart idea that they should be doing anyway, honestly. Alongside another change, the mythic farming, I mentioned mythics. They're increasing the drop chance by 5 times, which is a huge deal. You're going to be seeing a lot more of that rainbow shine. But on top of that, they're actually going to be adding the mythics to the transcendent system. So you can actually transcend your mythics to other characters on your account, which is huge. Obviously when the drop chance increase, you can try to hope to get a really good mythic on your main, but when that doesn't happen and you happen to get it on one of your alts or somebody you don't care as much about, you want to be able to transcend that better mythic to your main character, and they're adding that ability to be able to do that. It's going to be really costly, but when they're increasing the drop chance of mythics as is, it's going to be a really attractive option. I kind of wish they had that since the very beginning. But yeah, a whole bunch of convenience things kind of coincide with the idea that 105 cap is coming. They really stopped caring. They're like, yeah, whatever. You want mythics? You want epics? Here, you can transfer mythics. Everything's going to be half as you have half as much to farm. You're getting double materials. Some of these dungeons, like for instance, Oculus, you only have to go 1 time a week instead of 2. So really big deal. You know, BP, I think they're doing the same thing. BP, you only have to go once a week instead of 2. So I love seeing changes like that. I really hated the idea of them splitting up how many times you could do content a day. Like, I hated how, like, dude, I have the means to do Operation Hope all at once if I want to. But so why am I splitting it between different days? It was just so stupid. All of the systems that they have done that for, I've never kind of understood that. Tabers, they had the same. I've been complaining about this since like Tabers. You know, I was doing Tabers. And it was like we all coordinated to set up our Tabers parties, but we had to do the same thing again the next day for no other reason. We were all there to get ready to go, but hey, the game said we had to do it tomorrow. Such an arbitrary way to increase the duration of that. Yes, so. Ease of farming, but again, I'm not too hopeful that this is something they're going to be keeping all throughout DFO, because again, they're trying to extend the life of the game. This is only happening because, again, 105 cap has to be somewhere down the line. Some other things were mentioned, like for instance, Eterna FNN. Huge deal over there in KDNF. When Ozma Raid came out, Eterna FNN was the GOAT. And the reason why is that you can build cooldown reduction for your Nen Guard and basically give yourself infinite Nen Guard and just become an absolute unit, buffing up your team and making them invincible for the entirety of the fight. Super broken build. Yeah, they nerfed it. Get owned. So they, in fact, I think they already nerfed it. I think they reduced the abilities, the duration of the skill by like half or something like that, but only in Ozma Raid. So it's like, it's a viable build in everything but Ozma Raid, which is the only reason people were building Eterna FNN. Basically, get owned if you build Eterna FNN. Some people asked about the holding meta, for instance. Hey, are we bringing back the holding meta? Basically says, no, you want a good balance between, you know, he doesn't want the Anton days where you can hold somebody forever. But I do think you need a good balance between the two. But right now, he's just said, nah, we're not going to have infinite holdings, which is good. And then somebody, you know, I said it earlier, hey, somebody said, hey, EK's kit is a problem. Are you going to buff her damage? And the director said, you know, Chain Rush is part of EK's kit. And we're not trying to homogenize characters' kits, okay? So we want people to be special. And I've said this from the very start, you know. There's so many characters that play so similarly to each other. Why do you want EK to play like that? So, but they did say, well, hey, maybe we're just going to give her very strong damage to compensate. And you can expect the similar high risk, high return kind of methodology on other characters as well. And I kind of asked the stream yesterday, I was like, hey, well, what are the other high risk, high reward characters? So maybe you might see a big buff. You know, obviously EK in particular was already mentioned. Yeah, we're going to give her a damage buff to go inside with her high risk, high reward damage. We're going to give her a huge damage buff. I think other characters that fit the bill, maybe you can leave in the comments below. Male Striker and Skirmisher were the ones that I was thinking of, especially Male Striker. Oh my god. Seeing him get a huge damage buff would be a big deal. And Skirmisher too, you know. I think he needs a higher damage buff to coincide with his method of gameplay, guys. So it is some of the questions that were just kind of character specific. Other things that are kind of character specific, I already kind of mentioned it, but the third Awakenings, guys. The Third Awakening, some of them are getting some quality reworks, okay? Illustration reworks, Ghostblade, Azura, Shaman, F-Lunch, and Skirmy, and Kuno. All of them are getting new illustrations for their Third Awakenings. Holy shit, Ghostblade. I'm going to put him back on the screen. Look at him. Get him out of here. I actually have a cool image of what they're planning to make his Third Awakening instead. I think that's a way better sketch. Like, that looks way better. They can make... Look. Thank goodness. Thank goodness that they don't have this asshole in the way. They're going to be doing some cut-in reworks, which I think is a little bit of a shame. I actually... Look, like, yes, they need to do FNN's cut-in because it looks like only 3 frames of animation. But F-Brawlers almost looks... I don't know why they're doing it. So FNN, F-Brawler, and Ghostblade, they're going to be changing their 3A cut-in reworks. Honestly, I really love F-Brawler's cut-in image. It's very short, it's very quick, but it's very cinematically done, and it's appropriate for the character. So I'm a little bummed. Hopefully they don't make it too flashy because the old one is really good. I like it. And lastly, guys, they're going to be redoing some of the Third Awakening skills themselves. Okay, F-Striker, she's getting a new Third Awakening. Which the criticism there is, well, her Third Awakening is really just her First and Second Awakening combined, which is 100% true. Although that's the case, and it's really kind of low effort kind of Third Awakening, it does look really cool though. It looks good. I actually don't mind it. But Inquisitor, holy shit, thank goodness. Inquisitor's Third Awakening is the shittest in the whole game, for real. like the animation itself. Get this shit out of my face. You have a big ass like axe, and you have big high hitting moves, and you have this stupid rose bullshit. Get it out of here. But guys, I've been stalling. I really have been stalling. There's only been one topic I really wanted to talk about with this whole discussion. And I'm going to try to keep it brief, guys. I can talk about this topic. I can literally do one entire podcast about this one topic that was talked about in this director's note. Okay, I can do a whole podcast. I could probably talk for a week straight as to why it's been a huge issue. But I'm going to basically summarize what's going on. In this game, in DFO, we have a meta. It's called the BSD meta, okay? What does BSD stand for? Well, basically the 3 roles that you can fill in this game. B stands for buffer, S stands for synergy, and D stands for deeps, or DPS. Now, when you look at the class distribution, okay, we have 60-something characters in this game, 63, I think. 3 of those characters are buffers, okay? Synergies, we have a lot more. We have about 20-something characters. I want to say we have about, let's just say 20. About a third of our characters are synergy characters. So we have 3 characters. We have about 20 that are synergy. And then deeps fill up everybody else. That's almost 40 other characters. So they're making up like 2/3 of the characters. Synergies make up another third. And then the buffers make up literally only 3 out of like only 5% of the entire player base. So I know that doesn't add up, but you kind of get the point here. And so that's kind of how the class distribution works in DFO. That's who fills those roles in DFO. Here's the problem. The B characters, those 3 characters that I said, those 3 special god snowflakes of DFO comprise 100% of every party in DFO. You must, without fail, have a buffer in your team. The entire game is balanced around this entire role because their contribution to the party is something like, somebody's done the math, but basically if you put a deeps in the same slot that you normally would put a buffer, it would take the equivalent of 10 DPS characters to fill that one slot that the buffer can provide. That's how strong their buffs are. That's how strong they make the other 3 members of the team. Okay, you need a buffer in your team. He is the equivalent of having 10 deeps in the same spot. It is ridiculously overpowered. Okay, synergy is also a role that you need at the very least one of in your party. If you want to optimize it to the highest extent, you actually have 2 synergies and 1 deeps, but you need at least 1 because what they do is they provide a 34% damage buff to everybody else in their team. Okay, and then the last role is just for you peasant DPS characters. All your role is just to do damage. So again, you have those 3 roles. Buffers to buff up the rest of the team. Synergies, they do damage, but then they are also arbitrarily applying a 34% damage buff to everybody else in the team. And if you have 2 synergies in the party, then they can buff each other up. That's kind of the unfortunate thing, is that currently they only buff up the other members of the team. They can't buff up themselves. So if you have 2 synergies, then you can now use that buff effect, that synergy effect, to buff up each other. But, you know, that's why 2 synergies in one party is the best. And then finally, the deeps role doesn't really do anything but deeps. That's how the meta has been for the past 5 years, guys. There's so many problems here with this meta. There's so many problems. I'm just going to try to rattle off some problems that are right off the bat, guys. Okay, 1, buffers are just not fun to play, okay? And even if you are one of the few people that say, oh, I love playing buffers, I love playing the buffer character. First of all, I don't understand why you want to play one in a beat-em-up type game when this is a beat-em-up game. Why do you want to play the buffer in this type of game? Why not go play them in another type of game where buffer role is more appropriate? This is not an appropriate game archetype to have a buffer. But aside from that, even if you're the kind of person to say, oh, I like playing buffers, most of us don't. I'm going to say the majority. I don't think it's a controversy. Most of the people who have a satyr don't really want to play them. They don't sign into DFO to play their satyr. I really don't think that's the case. And if you do, you're one of the very few minorities, honestly. And it's not hard to see why. I mean, their whole role in the party is to just buff up your team and keep your team topped up. They're not really fighting or doing anything. If nothing's going on, like if your team is doing fine, what are you doing? You're just pretending. You're just hitting the guy and just smacking him, I guess. And your team is the one who's actually doing all the hard work. So it's just very like unengaging type gameplay. Yes, it can be engaging when you're healing and resurrecting people, but most of the time, no, you just kill. You just buff and kill. and you be a potion for the rest of your team. So the characters are not fun. I don't know. You can try to argue with me on this. Character is not fun to play, but then you're forced to play them. Why? Because buffers compose 100% of all in-game parties in DFO. So somebody has to play this character who is admittedly pretty boring to play. So somebody has to sacrifice their time and effort and enjoyment of DFO. They have to sacrifice that in order to have their friends be able to play the game at all. Okay, somebody has to do it. And it's so dumb how the entire game is balanced around this archetype. Doesn't make any sense. But the problem that leaves is that, okay, if 100% of parties are waiting for a buffer that most people don't want to play, well, guess what? Waiting times massively increase as we wait to fill this stupid meta that they have designed. If they design the entire game around only 3 characters in the game, 3 characters of which most people don't want to play because it's not very fun, of course your waiting times are going to increase to completely high lengths, and it's all arbitrarily made because that's how the game is designed. You need to have a buffer, and, we're waiting for them. For what? What are we waiting for? We have more than enough people ready to go, but we can't go. Why? Because nobody wants to play a buffer. How many times have we seen tons of people waiting to do content, whether it be raids, whether it be Oculus, whether it be anything in this game? You have more than 4 people ready to go. Why can we not go? Because we don't complete the stupid meta that the entire game is designed around. So, okay, you're playing a character you don't want to play. Wait times are massively increased. Here's another problem that the director himself came to learn as he was leveling his blade. He learned something. Let me tell you the story. What happens when the buffer characters outgrow some of the older content, right? What happens when the buffer characters stop needing to do content like Oculus, stop needing to do P-War or Exiles? What happens when all they're doing is raiding? Okay? That means that all the satyrs that you have are only going to be available for raid. When you try to level up a character brand new, you're not even going to have any satyrs ready to go. Okay, you have a lot of people playing DFO for the first time, and they're getting into this content, except there are no parties made. Why? Because there are no satyrs at that level anymore. They're all past it. There's probably a ton of people ready to go to do P-War, and nobody is a satyr. So you have a ton of people who could form parties, but they can't because the meta, again, is so limiting. And you have it based around one type of character who, after they've graduated, what's the point of me bringing my satyr over to P-War nowadays? I don't need fucking P-War. I'm doing Sirocco raid. I hardly even need that anymore. I'm doing BP only nowadays. You think I'm doing fucking Exiles or P-War with all these scrubs who are trying to level up their new characters? No. As a satyr, as a person who has a satyr and has the ability to do that, I'm not doing that. You might have like 50 DPS characters who are ready to go who made their new Blade character. You can't even form a party to do it. Why? Because the game is stupid. And hilariously, that's exactly what happened to the director. Okay, I wanted to talk about this because as he was leveling his Blade, he had a little situation. So as the director was trying to level his Blade and he was trying to get into P-War, he realized that the only parties that were there were cell parties, which is obviously a point of contention for some people. Some people don't like the idea of cell parties. Well, let me tell you, cell parties only exist because people have to sacrifice their time and effort to bring characters who are over-geared for their content. It would be so easy to set up a party of people who are ready to go, who are at that level, whether it be a Synergy or a Deeps or whoever is ready at that level. It'd be really easy to coordinate with other people who are at the same level. But that doesn't happen. Those aren't the parties that are made because, again, the satyrs have already outgrown the content. And most people, there's only 3 characters out of all 60-something that are going to be satyrs. What are the odds that one of them is also going to be trying to do P-War at the same time? Odds are you're going to have a lot of other characters, 50-something other characters that are doing P-War at the time. So, of course, cell parties are going to be the only one that are going to be available because they're the only ones who are committed to actually capitalizing on the people who are trying to freaking gear up in this game. It's a stupid fucking system. So, okay, he sees that there's only cell parties. He waits a little longer, joins a normal party, tells everybody that's his first time. Boom, gets expelled instantly. He was upset is what he said. He wanted to do normal and then was forced to do God mode. He got expelled. He literally went to a party. He got expelled. He got elitist out of the party as a Blade, as a Deeps character. Do you see how expendable Deeps characters have become? Where literally you're in P-War, there's only cell parties, there's only one party there. You join as a competent member of the team and you get kicked for the simple reason that, hey, you're kind of new. That's how expendable Deeps are in this meta. Okay, they probably had that party form because they had a satyr. They're like, okay, somebody's a satyr. Hey, well, Deeps are a dime a dozen. I can get Deeps literally anywhere. Get the fuck out of here. Even though there's only one legit party ready to go, they kicked him out of the party. I hope that made him realize something, that you have cultivated an environment where elitism to this extent is possible, where you can kick anybody for any fucking reason as long as they're deeps. I guarantee you, if he was playing a satyr and he said, hey, it's my first time, everybody in the party would be like sucking his toes, man. They'll be like, oh, I don't care. I don't care if it's your first time. You're a satyr. You're the god. We won't ever expel you. Why? Because satyrs are gods in this meta. You made it that way. And deeps are trash because you're a dime a dozen. There's 40 other people of you in the party. You made this. So I hope that him getting owned by those elitists kind of made him realize how stupid the meta is to have in the first place and how debilitating it is for older content or for people trying to get into the game who aren't up to date with everything. Okay? That's just one of the few problems that this meta has, okay? You're playing a stupid character. Your wait times are incredibly shitty. You can't even make parties for the older content if it's not cell content because everybody else has already graduated and you still need those satyrs. Stupid game design. What are you going to do about it? Well, first, they address the synergies, okay? The thing that they're going to change about the synergies, I'll just say right now, they have a couple ideas. Nothing's set in stone. Everything is kind of talked about, but the fact that they're talking about it is already a good in my book. But what they're doing is they're intending to have the synergy effect apply on the character itself. So again, like I said, it only applies to other teammates, that synergy effect. Now they're planning on make it apply to yourself. So that 34% damage buff, it applies to everybody in the party, including themselves, which would buff them up pretty tremendously. And it would also nerf the strength and viability of the double sin party, okay? So now you don't need to have two different synergies in the party to buff each other up. Now you just need the one, which is good. But honestly, I don't think synergies really were a big deal. I think most people, since they compose about a third of the player base anyway, at least in terms of the character selection, there's a lot of synergies out there. A lot of people play synergies just because they enjoy the character. Like that's why I play my paladin. That's why I play my mistress. So, got no issue with that. But they also said that this is going to be like a temporary band-aid fix. They're thinking about other stuff. They're thinking about maybe not having synergies, which is what I have been saying since the very beginning. I think the whole concept of synergies has no purpose in this game. I don't understand what their fascination of the 34% damage buff. Where did that number come from, and why do only some characters have it? Like, I really don't understand that idea. I don't understand that concept. It makes no sense, and no other game in this genre, the genre of beat-em-up games, have ever thought that this would be necessary. But because it's necessary in DFO, they've striated the player base. They've put them in little boxes, and they've forced every party to follow this meta. No other fucking game in this genre, or any genre like it, I'm thinking games like C9 and other beat-em-ups of the arcade genre, ever thought to have a goddamn synergy, and now, it's become an issue. So get rid of them, okay? But then they came back after they said, okay, well, maybe there won't be a synergy and deep split, but instead we're going to have the 34% damage buff moved on to synergy gear. And all classes will need to equip it to get a synergy buff. And I thought this was yet another stupid idea. I don't understand what their fascination is with the 34% damage amp, dude. Who fucking cares, dude? Why? Tell me what their fascination is. Get rid of it. Get rid of it, and this game will not have anything change on any level. Get rid of it. It's very fucking simple. Who wants to wear a fucking Eterna set? Now we're just sacrificing a teammate to wear an Eterna set to buff up their other teammates. The same fucking problem. It's even worse, actually. Because instead of, synergy just being inherently weaker than deeps, now you have literally one party member of the team just inherently weaker than everybody else. The potion backpack character, they need to stop with this 34% shit and get rid of it. Seriously. Please tell me in the comments what the 34% damage buff is adding to your enjoyment of DFO. I'll tell you right now, if you deleted it from the game this second and buffed up everybody accordingly, there would be no change in DFO's gameplay at all. But again, like I said, if they decide to make it so that the sin buff applies to themselves, that's whatever, okay. I don't think we have a problem with synergies, guys. We have a big problem, though, with buffers. We have a problem with buffers, and it is so obvious. It's so apparent when one buffer makes up the effectiveness of 10 deeps in the same slot. The entire game is balanced around buffers. What are they going to do about that? Well, they have a lot of ideas. My primary idea, what I think, and something that they have suggested, add an option where Satyr adds only one person's worth of damage to the team, and then you nerf everything in accordance to that balance. That is my suggestion to what they should do about buffers. And there's a couple reasons why I support that level of change. One, it does not delete satyrs from the game. If you're one of those cats who think, I love satyr, I love the idea of satyr, I spent so much money gearing my satyr, I want to keep playing my satyr. If you're one of those people, this change would not affect you in the slightest. You would still be as geared as you are today. Most buffers nowadays are way more geared than deeps can even possibly gear up. Remember with buffers, they actually buff up their swap buff skill as well as their first awakening. They're the only characters who really have that ability to do that, where they have their buff swap and then most everything is contributing entirely to their first awakening. Most characters can't do that. They have a limit as to how strong their buff swap can be, and then everything else is just how much damage they can do. Buffers can gear more than a deeps can ever possibly gear, okay? So that already is still intact. You're going to be still the strongest best in slot member of a team if they nerf your effectiveness. If they make you the same level as the deeps character is in terms of your effectiveness, you're already naturally going to be able to gear higher than a deeps can. You'll still be the best in slot character in that slot, but the game won't be balanced around you. That's the difference. That's the takeaway. Okay, the fact that buffers right now are mandatory instead of some optional choice that you would choose if you like that type of gameplay, that's what's making the game insufferable to play, insufferable, a waste of time. They're making people suffer the character of Crusader or buffers in general because most of us don't want to play it, but we have to because that's how the game is designed. This would fix all of that, and it would come at no cost to the people who actually like the satyr gameplay. You would still be the best in slot character in the game, and if you really liked it, you would still be accepted in 100% of all parties, guaranteed, if you offered yourself up. But I think most people are just going to say, you know what, we don't need a buffer. I'm going to go in with 4 deeps or whatever they decide to balance it, 4 deeps or 3 deeps and a sin, and that's good enough. The content is still balanced around everybody in the game's average power level instead of 1 character or 3 characters power level that they contribute to the team. It'd be so much better. There are some other options. Something that they did in the Eterna farming, for instance, is they actually nerfed the content based off of who was in the party. So if there was no buffer in the party, they actually nerfed the content so that it was way easier and to the level where you didn't need to bring buffers. If a buffer wasn't in your party when you're farming for Eterna bosses, then the dungeon was just easier and it felt no different. They actually did a pretty decent job at nerfing the content to the extent where you don't need to bring a buffer to all content, which is another way you could do it. I think it's a little too complicated to do it that way because there's a lot of permutations and combinations you can do with party setups, but it is something you could do. But fact of the matter is, guys, whatever they decide to do with the buffers, basically what they're saying is they plan to address the issue of buffers being mandatory. And if they do anything to any extent to buffers being mandatory for all parties, if they nerf that aspect of it in any capacity, if they, whatever they decide to do, if you just delete the reliance of satyrs, you solve so many issues. Parties are able to complete content so much faster because they're not waiting for people. Old content would not have the monopoly on people selling that content. You would just have people doing the content because that's where they currently are. And there would be a lot of people that would be ready to join parties. Making and forming parties would just be 100 times easier. And last but not least, people wouldn't be forced to be playing a character they didn't want to play because, again, it wouldn't be mandatory to play the fucking game. But anyway, guys, my voice is running out. I've talked way too long, but I have to edit all of this up. So, Knights, big on.